Welcome back to the ExEm podcast. Here is your host, licensed mental health therapist, Matthew Kanabe.
So I'm going to ask you to stick with me on today's topic. Not because I think our guest isn't great, interesting, and he's really funny, but many of us brush off this topic not as a big deal. I've wanted to cover this for a while, and today we just hit the surface of something that we all do, but many of us do poorly: sleep. Sleep hygiene is a real thing, and I think it's causing more distress in people's lives than we actually realize. To discuss this topic, please welcome to the show Dr. Ryan Darrow.
It's a privilege to chat with whomever is listening out there in cyberspace.
We have no idea.
Whether it be next week or 10 years from now.
That's
or
right.
1,000 years from now, and open up a time capsule, and this is what they put in it.
Yeah.
My name is Ryan, and married 23 years. I guess the best thing to know about me is I love Jesus. And met Jesus when I was 15 years old after a life of wild living. And,
really?
Even at 15.
Even at 15.
I started early.
Yeah, good.
Sneaking out of the house at 12 and doing all sorts of crazy things. But I met Jesus at 15, met my wife at 15. We've been married 23 years, been together 28. We have 3 boys.
Wow, you got married young.
19, 17, 13, yeah.
Wow,
they're
good for you.
just so wonderful. Been marriage and family therapist for quite a few years, and was introduced to the world of therapy as a young pastor right out of Bible college with a degree in Bible. I was challenged by the lead pastor, hey, I'm going to have you do all the counseling. And I was 22 years old and been married 2 years, and of course I had all the skills necessary from my Bible degree in undergrad. I didn't know what I was doing, so went back to school and did a little further education and got a degree in counseling, and then discovered, well, I want to be a therapist, so I had to go back and do a little bit even more, and so master's in marriage and family therapy, and then from there went out to Arizona. I was privileged to serve on a staff of a mega church. They decided one of their core values was emotional and mental health. And so they hired a full-time therapist on staff, paid a salary, and said, we just want you to care for the hearts of our people. And so I did counseling 30, 35 hours a week and ran small groups. So from there, did some more schooling and a doctorate in counseling psychology, and finished that while I was out there in Arizona, and kind of was at a crossroads. Am I going to go academic full-time? I've been teaching college about 14 years now. Started out at Kansas State University as a TA years ago, and really enjoyed that because preaching and teaching are extremely similar, whether it be in the pulpit in a church or whether it be in the lectern at a college. And I've been doing that for 14 years now, and had multiple students over the years come to know Jesus through getting to know me and just seeing Christ in me, and then have that process of discovery has been very beautiful over the years. And so
that's awesome.
I've been in the academic world for many years, and had the privilege to teach and even write some in some college textbooks with Pearson Publications out of Boston. So it's been a unique journey, and I've been lead pastor now.
I was going to say, we got to talk about where you're at now.
Yeah, so 10 years. It's been 10 and a half years in Kansas City. Lead pastor of Overland Park First Assembly of God Church there in Kansas City.
Do you feel like you're still able to use a lot of the counseling stuff?
Yeah. Interestingly, no. I had a lot of commentary regarding that when I finished school. I was at that crossroads. I finished the doctoral program, and people said, because I said I'm going to go. Now I'm not going to teach full time. I'm not going to go do therapy full time. I said I'm going to go be a lead pastor. The Lord called me to the pulpit, and I'm going to be a lead pastor. And so many people say, what a waste of time, and all this education, and you're just going to pastor. And I just laughed, and I said, do you know what pastoring is?
What a waste of time.
90, all that education is down the tubes. I said, 95% of what I do is just people, knowing motivation and helping people.
It's funny you say that. About 2 weeks, I've never pastored. I've never been in the pulpit. I've done a ton of public speaking. You and I were talking on the way over to the podcast. I have a background in music, so I'm comfortable in being in front of people. But pastoring, man, that's a different thing. I mean, I can speak. I know I can see the similarities, but if I didn't have the mental health background and then getting up there on a Sunday morning, I was like, what am I doing here? This is crazy.
I remember the biggest thought I had was, how am I going to preach every Sunday? I'm going to come up with an hour of something to say every Sunday for the next. And now
that's how I felt too. I prepared for like a month and a half for one Sunday. Right. It's like, how do these guys do it? So what I want to get into and talk about, and we can just kind of see where this conversation goes, but you and I kind of struck a chord with each other because we have a similar passion, and it's I'm going to say it, and people are going to be like, But sleep hygiene.
For sleep. We have passion for sleep.
Why do you think that this is something? Because it's not something that I think I've really broached on the podcast.
Right.
But it's also something I'm extremely passionate about. You can ask my wife, like, this is how my house goes. If we have community group or friends over on a Sunday night and I got to be at work on Monday and people want to hang out past like 10 o'clock, I'm like, hang out. But I'm going to bed. Mm-hmm. And they're like, but you live here. I'm like, you can stay as long as you like. Yep. But I have to do that because I know my body doesn't work.
Right.
Talk to me a little bit about sleep hygiene.
Well, my wife's grandfather had a phrase. He's a Swedish man. He would say this phrase all the time. I'm just off the top of my head just now. He would say when people would stay like late in the evening, they'd be there at 8 or 9 o'clock at night. He'd look to his wife and he'd say, well, honey, we ought to go to bed so these people can leave. We are a bootstraps culture, especially in America, or Western bootstraps culture. Pull yourself up, our bootstraps, work hard until you're dead.
Yeah.
That's American ingenuity. But along with that comes a negation of not just our obligation to sleep. If you don't sleep, you'll die. And neurologists, and all the research is out there. And there's been people that have tried to set world records and all sorts of stuff on sleep. And it's interesting. And when I talk about neuroanatomy and we talk about sleep and sleep apnea, sleep quality, even depression in adult women, that there's a variable correlation between depression and women whose husbands snore persistently and snore at night.
Isn't
you're
that
like,
interesting?
Wait, what?
Like, we don't think about stuff like that.
Right. And she started looking into the research on all this stuff, and it comes up. I remember grad school, I was going through the list of all the classes for my marriage and family therapy program, and I was going, cool, yeah, that one's good. Cool, look at that one. And I got to this one on career and guidance counseling. I was like, that'll be a waste of time. And I got to class that semester, and I got a class, and the guy who was leading is Dr. something or other, and he gets up and he goes, how many honestly think this is going to be an absolute waste of time? 90% of us raised our hand. And he goes, I completely concur with you. I totally thought the same thing. But how much of our week is consumed, especially in American culture, with work? He said, if you're going to be a therapist, this is going to have to be a lens through which you look at people. Yeah. And I thought, by the end of the semester, I was like, this is so valuable. And it's one of the things that I vet in therapy right up front. I'll ask people, if they're of faith, often I'll ask them, what does Jesus say to you about this? What does the Word say to you about this? Have you prayed about this? Of course. Yeah. I'll also ask about work a lot. Tell me about your work satisfaction, dissatisfaction. Tell me about, it's just a lens. Sleep is so often overlooked when it comes to people's mental and emotional health. Yeah. And I'll ask people about their sleep patterns. Tell me when you go to bed at night. They're like, what? Yeah. That's
not why I came here.
I hear my little son Johnny's rotten. I'm like, okay. Could it be that he's on edge systemically? Look at the whole of the family. Could it be he's on edge? You're using him as the scapegoat because you are persistently grumpy because of why Yeah. Could it be depression? Yeah, and we'll vet through that. Could it be anxiety? Yeah, and we'll vet through that. Yeah. Could it be other areas in your life? Yes. Yeah. But is it perhaps insomnia? Yeah. I had a pastor that told me for years, he came in as a client, I said, well, tell me about your sleep patterns. And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, tell me, what time you go to bed, what time do you get up? And he said, well, and he just kind of went through his nightly routine. He's like, 9 o'clock at night or so. He goes, I have gotten up every night for the last, he said at first, it's been about 3 o'clock in the morning. I wake up every night, about 3 o'clock in the morning. I said, really? He said, yeah, about between 3 and 5 every night. I'm awake every night, 3 and 5. I said, wow. And as the therapist, one of the questions we ask is persistence. How long has it been going on? Mm-hmm. Because one instance does not a pattern make, of course. So, somebody says, well, it happened once. I heard voices. When? One time. Oh, okay. All right. And somebody, says I've heard them persistently. That can be pathological. And so I ask him, how long has this been going on? And he goes, let's see. And he's like, let's see, I was a youth pastor here. He goes, more than 20 years. Yeah. I said, well, do you think that's a problem? He said, yeah. What do you think what's been the ramifications because of that? All that. Well, what have you done because of it? And it just started a conversation with him. Insomnia is so often overlooked. Sleep quality is so often overlooked. I'm not telling people they have to go out and buy a new king-size mattress from some fancy one or another, but it's something to consider. Yeah. Right?
Well, I think some of the things that I find very interesting is like working with clients and then I'll ask their sleep patterns. That's usually something I'll ask in intake and talk to me about when you go to sleep. Do you stay asleep? When do you get up? And then we'll do a quick math problem. And over a 7-day period, we'll add it all up, and I'll be like, you sleep about 35 hours a week. And they're like, okay. And I'm like, you need 56. We need to get into that. And they're like, oh. And I'm like, you're essentially almost losing 2 nights of sleep every week. And they're like, oh, I never thought about that. But we work till 11 o'clock, 12 because we push. We, start doing things at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning because we don't have enough time during the day, and different things like that. But like just getting an understanding of, like, so many clients I go to, and I'll say, on average, how much do you sleep at night? Probably, and they'll say this, a good 5-6 hours. I'm like, that's not good. It's not good at all. In fact, that's terrible.
Right. And you so often hear the touted example of the self-aggrandizing statement, well, I don't need that much sleep. You go, really?
God gave me this superhuman power. Like, I don't need to eat either. It's weird.
Yeah. You've talked to your physician about that, I'm sure. And like, well, no, or whatever. Because you're going to, I defy someone to find a physician or a neurologist or a sleep study person who will tell you, yeah, you're good on 4 hours for the rest of your life. It's just not how we're designed.
Right. Well, and I think the big thing when it comes to mental health is it's those hours that we're sleeping is when the body restores itself. Mm-hmm. And so what's happening is you're going through, let's just say the last year and a half, a higher level of stress, different anxieties than we've ever experienced before. And then we're going on 5 hours of sleep, and the body's not able to actually do the work to get you back to homeostasis. And that's a huge problem. And you think you're doing yourself a service by going, look at all the work I'm getting done, and I'm only sleeping. But then all of a sudden, 2 months goes by, 3 months goes by, and all of a sudden it's like, well, why am I anxious all the time? Why do I have depression problems? Why do I have issues in my relationships? Yeah.
Any therapist worth their salt will love, any Christian therapist will love that scripture, Romans 12, 1 through 2, that don't be conformed any longer to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Yeah. And I'll often ask those who are of faith, tell me about how you're renewing your mind. How do you where do you give this space for the Lord to renew your mind? There's a powerful word throughout the Psalms that we often just skip right over. You'll read the beauty of the lyric, the psalm itself, and then skip right over the word, although they'll say the word. They'll read the scripture and then say the word and then get on to the next section, say the word, and they don't even realize what they're saying. Yeah. Beautiful Hebrew word, Selah, S-E-L-A-H, Selah, which is put in there by the psalm writer, and it's a call for reflection. It's a pause, and it literally means stop, calm, be still, pause, and reflect. Yeah. Think about what was just said. Yeah. In our fast-paced, drive-through American culture, bootstrapped, go. Where are we to pause? Where are we? And it's almost like the Lord designed within each one of us this nightly routine, this pausing of our day, of our life. Yeah. Be still and know that I am God.
And even there are studies that show the body moves with the sun as far as the chemical reaction that happens in the body. And what happens is the natural response to the sun going down in evening, there's a chemical response that goes off in the body that I believe God created on purpose.
Absolutely.
And then we've created devices. And what happens is the sun goes down, and then we turn on all our devices, and we watch TVs and have our computers, and our body goes, wait a minute, I thought we were going to sleep. And we just hijack that entire system. Mm-hmm. And what we try to do then is we take medications or supplements to counteract the process that we already hijacked to do that, which then screws up our body even more. And then what happens is the sun starts to come up and we fight against it. Right. Because we want to wake up at noon. Yeah. At least a lot of my teen clients.
So if we're to cut our head in half and then cut your head again in half and then cut it right in the very, very middle, well, first of all, if you did that, you'd be dead. But
don't do that. Disclaimer.
And I'll make the disclaimers I often say in therapy. I'm a therapist. I'm not a physician. So reference your physician. Go talk to your doctor about this. But there's a powerful. This is called the supraspasmatic nucleus. It's right in the middle of your brain, and it's that 24-hour circadian light dark cycle. Your sleep patterns are on a light. Light enters the eye. hits the supraspasmatic nucleus, and it shuts down the production of melatonin.
Yes, that's right.
Right. This is what you're referencing.
Yeah.
And that melatonin, as it kind of seeps out of our system real quick, then we become aroused in the morning. We wake up over a 90-minute period or so. And we get up, we're ready for the day, and we do so for natural light. They say natural light's the most beautiful way to wake up.
Right.
So
we don't do that.
We don't do it. We pull the shades. Everything's artificial.
Yeah.
We have lamps. We have lights. We have that. And Apple tried to, tackle it a few years ago when they did the whole.
It did, and it probably helps.
Light, green light.
It probably helps on a level.
Light.
But I think in a whole, we can't be in denial of the fact that we're fighting against the natural processes that are already implemented. That so many people, I like you and I talked yesterday, and it's like so many clients have been at least helped or assisted from their presenting concern just by regulating sleep.
Yes.
Without getting into medications, without getting into therapy, just regulating sleep. Right? I want to have, you and I are going to have this conversation again because I want to do a whole long podcast on this because I think we could probably parlay this into nutrition and then exercise and a little bit just like the disciplines of life that we get out of whack and we're like, why don't I feel good anymore? And why am I so lethargic? And you know what I mean?
Right.
Is there any last thoughts you would like to have in our time here, and then we'll reconnect?
Sure.
For sure.
Yeah,
soon.
Journal Family Medicine said 33%. So the Bible says, no temptation has seized you except that which is common to man.
Yeah.
So we're kind of in this boat together. We get it. I don't want people to feel too isolated, those that are struggling with. You look around you, about 33% of people around you deal with persistent and chronic pathological insomnia.
Yeah.
Whether they be para-insomnias, difficult time getting to sleep or a difficult time waking up, staying asleep, and so forth. But there's that insomnia as a general sense, a general problem, general pathological trait. About 33% of people deal with it. Top 5 issues or variables that lead to insomnia: work dissatisfaction, stress. People lay in bed at night thinking about tomorrow or thinking about that day. Conflict at home, financial concerns at home and at work, family stress, and I'm going to say this last one a little bit hypocritically, caffeine intake.
We talked about that yesterday. I told you about my one client. I mean,
right.
He came to me. He was like, dude, I can't sleep and all this stuff. And
pots of coffee.
He had like 20 pots of coffee, and we cut it down to like 2. And he's like, man, my anxiety's lower. My marriage is better. Yeah. Dude, it's so good to talk to you. We're going to continue this conversation. And the other thing, too, we need to hang out. I think you and I have a lot of fun hanging out together. Dude, Ryan, thanks so much for your time.
Love it.
Well, thank you, Ryan. Man, I really enjoyed hanging with him and discussing these truths about how our bodies repair and rest. I have a feeling he and I will continue this conversation, among many other things, in the future. I think he and I could go back and forth all day long with our similar interests. But please take this topic into consideration. Take some inventory into your life around how you are allowing your body to recoup. And please visit our social media outlets by searching Emerge Counseling Ministries. Well, until next time, or when our Savior comes, God bless.